Welcome to Unbound, the podcast with Beth Curry, author, storyteller, and survivor. This is where books meet real life, where Beth reads chapters from her work and breaks free from the traditional audiobook format, diving deeper into the personal experiences, lessons, and liberation behind every page. Nothing is off limits. Let's get unbound.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Unbound. This is an off-script episode, and it's going to be kind of a mashup of a couple of different things. Since season 3 is finished, I want to talk about something that's kind of been sitting on my chest like a wet cat for the better part of the last few months. And hopefully a little later, Nate will be joining me to talk about what some of you are curious about with regards to him. So we're wrapping up the season, and of course I'm reflecting on the journey, releasing my memoir, my story. I've kind of been struck by this very specific and very quiet phenomenon of sorts. People probably don't talk about it because to talk about it, you have to admit it's happening, and admitting it's happening means admitting that it stings. And nobody who just told the most personal parts of her story wants to say that out loud, in a podcast, that it hurts. Because that kind of feels ungrateful and it feels small, I guess. But what I do know about myself, I don't do small. So here we go. When I was writing the book, sharing the deepest, darkest secrets I've carried for decades, there was a lot of noise. Okay. Like there was a lot of in my face energy from people I know, people I've known for years. When is it coming out? I can't wait to read it. Make sure I get a signed copy, all of that great stuff that I really do appreciate. The anticipation was loud for sure. It was almost aggressive, but in that kind of well-meaning giddy way that people get when they smell a story coming, right? And I get it. I really do, because I'm also that person. Tell me you have a secret and I will immediately become the most invested audience member you have ever had in your life. That's part of being human, right? That's the hook entirely. But for me, the book came and I delivered it to people. I drove to different towns. I drove in snowstorms. I was at the post office 12 times for like so many batches. I signed the pages. I said kind things. I handed over something that cost me years of my life and the better part of my dignity to put on paper. All totally fine. I was happy to do it all. But then, you know what? Silence. For some, the connection just kind of stopped. There was no feedback. There was no, I finished it. There was no check-in. No, hey, how are you after releasing something like that into the world? Just kind of a digital and social dial tone, crickets with better Wi-Fi or some shit. I don't know. At first, that silence kind of feels like judgment. Okay. Like this is a normal human reaction. It feels like confirmation of the very thing I feared most before I ever typed the first word, that by telling my truth, I would lose the people I cared about, that being too much would cost me something I couldn't get back. And here I was handing out evidence signed with a personal note and getting nothing in return. Now, let me be clear, okay? I didn't and don't expect it at all. But part of me thought it would come. And I'm not judging people at all here, okay? I'm not judging anyone. If you're listening to this and thinking, wait a minute, I think she's talking about me, I'm not thinking of any specific person right now because a lot of books went out. I'm just like thinking about the portion of them that just kind of, you know what I mean? So here's the thing, okay? I love psychology here. I love talking about it. I love digging deep. It's kind of my whole thing, right? So I wanted to pull back the curtain on why this happens. And because it might happen to you, I want you to understand. Because once you understand the mechanics of it, it stops feeling like a personal rejection and starts kind of feeling like something a lot more complicated. And honestly, I'd say a lot more human. It's rarely about the quality of the story, right? It's almost always about the complex and messy as hell ways that humans process other people's vulnerability, especially when they weren't expecting to have to. But I mean, I didn't force this on people. But anyway, today I'm talking about the silence after the secret. So I'm going to start at the beginning. It's kind of the leading up phase, right? Like, why were people so loud before the book arrived? And where the hell did all that energy go? So psychologically, there's something called the curiosity gap. It's the basic idea is that humans are neurologically wired to seek out missing information, right? So when you announce you're writing a memoir about your darkest secrets, you create kind of this massive cognitive itch that people feel genuinely compelled to scratch. It's almost involuntary, which is pretty wild, eh? So the brain identifies a gap between what it knows and what it suspects exists, and it does not like that gap. It wants that gap closed. Okay. So people attach themselves to the promise of your story because on some level their brain is treating it, I guess, kind of like unfinished business, right? Many people in my life maybe wanted to just finally get the missing pieces of the puzzle that has confused them for so long, right? And there's also like social currency in it too. There's this genuine prestige in being in the know, being the person who gets the signed copy early and who finishes it first and who could whisper to someone else, "Oh, I've read it. It's a lot." People want to be in that inner circle, right? They want the access and the anticipation becomes its own event. Cool. Totally normal. But there's kind of a darker side to all of this, and I'm going to say it plainly because that's what we do here: emotional voyeurism. So sometimes, and I mean this with as much compassion as I can muster, people are drawn to our trauma not because they want to support our healing, right? They want to witness the spectacle of it. It's the car crash effect or the train wreck, right? Same reason true crime is a billion-dollar industry, right? The adrenaline lives in the anticipation, in the approach and in the moment right before the reveal. They are high on the idea of knowing. But once they actually have the book in their hands, the mystery's gone, right? The gap is closed. And for a voyeur, even a well-intentioned, genuinely fond of you voyeur, the thrill was always in the reveal and not in the relationship that follows. So here's where it gets uncomfortable. When the spectacle of Beth's dark secrets turns into 360 pages of a real human being's actual painstaking, meticulously honest pain, it kind of stops being content, right? It starts being confrontation. I guess it kind of demands something from the reader that the excitement of the lead up never did. And that's precisely where the disappearing act begins. They got what they wanted, the information, the story, the confirmation that yes, things really were that bad. And yes, Beth really did go through all of that, but they weren't really prepared for what comes after that confirmation, right? They weren't prepared for the weight of now holding your truth inside of them, for the responsibility of being a witness and making that choice. Because like I said, I didn't force this on anyone. It's a different ask entirely, and not everyone showed up equipped to answer it, right? Brene Brown, love her. Her concept of the vulnerability hangover, that specific soul-curdling feeling the morning after you've shared something deeply personal, when you wake up and immediately want to drive yourself into the sun. You said too much, you went too far, you're now going to have to look at that person in the eye at some point, and you have no idea what their face is going to do. I know that feeling well. Most of us do. But what I've been sitting with lately is something slightly different. The vulnerability hangover by proxy. So when you read someone's deepest secrets, I mean, really read them, not skim them, right? Not skip to the good parts. You're entering this kind of intense level of intimacy with that person without the slow, natural buildup that usually governs how closeness works, right? You've effectively fast forwarded this relationship to a depth that the other person may not have the emotional infrastructure to handle, right? They didn't ease in. They didn't build up to it over years of careful trust and shared experience. They sat down with a cup of coffee on a Tuesday afternoon, and they were suddenly inside the most private rooms of someone they thought they knew. That is a lot. So think about the friend who told me she was 6 chapters in, excited, engaged, almost breathless about it, and then just stopped. No update, no I finished it, no word. Or the one who asked for my email to send me some feedback 6 weeks ago, and the inbox remains pristine on that front, I can tell you. Psychologically, what is almost certainly happening here is what I call social paralysis. They've read enough to understand the weight of what they're holding. They realize on some level that good job, Beth, is going to land like a participation ribbon at the end of a marathon. Too small, maybe embarrassingly insufficient for the gravity of the thing. So they freeze and they think, I need to say something meaningful, but yet they don't have that yet. So they decide to wait until they do. And then a week passes, and then 2, and then it's been a month. And now there's a second problem, which is that the silence itself has calcified into an awkward, unmovable thing, right? Now they can't reach out without acknowledging the silence. And acknowledging the silence requires explaining the silence. And explaining the silence means admitting that they were paralyzed and didn't know what to say. And that admission requires a level of self-awareness and vulnerability that, surprise, surprise, not everyone has in ready supply. And again, I just want to reiterate, it's okay. I don't need you to say all the things to me. It's okay. Just don't ghost me at all. You don't have to talk about my book at all, but talk to me again, please. But anyway, the email never gets sent and the conversation never happens. And from the outside, it looks like they don't care, but that's almost certainly not what's going on here. What's going on is that they care too much and have no idea what to do with that. I'm honestly not sure which is harder to sit with. Someone who didn't feel enough to respond or someone who felt too much and couldn't, right? And I'm in this funny place of not being able to contact them and ask either because, well, it's not that I don't care. It's just that I don't want to make them uncomfortable. And maybe too, they just don't like my writing. I don't know. If they read my really early stuff, I get it. Anyway, this is the part of psychology that I think is the most uncomfortable, not just to sit with, but to say out loud, because it implicates people in a way that doesn't make them look great, even when they're not doing it on purpose, right? So I want to be careful here. I want to be honest without being mean. Those two things are occasionally at war with each other, and I'm doing my best to referee. Okay, so when you speak your truth publicly, you aren't just telling your story, right? You are, whether you intend to or not, holding up a mirror to every single person in your life who has ever known you. And mirrors, as a general rule, are not always welcome. So this is what I think of as the mirror effect. Okay. When I'm open about my trauma and my history and my darkest chapters, and I put it all on paper in a form that people I know are actively reading or listening to, I am demonstrating, without saying a word, except when I'm reading it out loud to you, what is possible, what it looks like when someone decides to stop running. And for some people, that's inspiring, but for others, it is quietly devastating, right? If Beth can face her past and put it in print, they think, why am I still hiding mine? Your bravery becomes, without any intention on your part, a silent critique of their own avoidance and their own held breath and their own postponed reckonings, right? You didn't mean to do that. I certainly didn't. I was just trying to tell my story. But the effect is the same. And if someone has what I'd call shared drama with you, kind of a history that overlaps with yours or a dynamic that was defined by you being a certain kind of person, and you've now evolved past that into a place of reflection and authorship and, frankly, clarity, you've changed the deal, right? You're no longer the co-pilot in a drama they were comfortable navigating, right? The map they had for you doesn't match the territory anymore. And this creates this cognitive dissonance in a way that's genuinely destabilizing for some people. They knew old Beth, the one they could locate within a story that they were a part of, or at least adjacent to, the one who maybe kept things quieter or didn't push or fit neatly into some sort of a role in the narrative of their own life. But now they're holding a book by new Beth, the one who looked at all of it and named all of it and had the absolute audacity to put it in print and hand it to them personally with a kind note. These two versions of you cannot easily coexist in the mental model that they had built. And rather than do the hard, slow work of updating that model, of sitting with the discomfort of someone they thought they knew turning out to be someone far more complicated and ultimately far more whole, it's psychologically cheaper to just withdraw, right? Pull back. Don't engage. Just let the relationship go quietly rather than confront the fact that their version of you was always a little bit incomplete. That's not malice, though. That's exhaustion and self-protection, and it's humans doing what humans do when reality starts costing more than they budgeted for. right? I want to be really honest with you all right now. And I don't mean talk show honest. I mean actually honest in the way that does cost something. Okay. This silence is exactly why I hesitated for so long. Not the writing. The writing comes when it comes. I can't stop that any more than I could stop breathing. But the publishing and the delivery and the part where I put it in someone's actual hands and I watch them walk away with the most interior parts of me under their arm like a library book. Okay, I was afraid of that by being too much or too real or too specific about things that people preferred to keep hazy, I would lose these connections that genuinely mattered to me. Not acquaintances and not the peripheral people, but the ones I've known for years and the ones I thought I knew and thought knew me. And in a way, I was right. I did lose some, or at least some version of what those connections were, right? But this is where attachment theory gets interesting and also a little bleak. So buckle up. Some of our relationships are what I call contingent relationships. They're conditional, not on us being good or kind or present, but on us staying within a certain set of parameters. Okay. Maybe on us making too many waves, on fitting the version of ourselves that was established early and never seriously renegotiated, that kind of thing. So when you write a memoir, you blow the parameters. You are essentially announcing, this is the full fucking version of me. This is not the curated version. It's not the version that keeps the peace. This is the whole complicated, sometimes very ugly, ultimately very human version of me. Take it or leave it. And some people take it. Those are usually the ones who surprise you. The ones you didn't expect to call, who call. The stranger who emails you at 11 on a Wednesday to say they finished the book on their bathroom floor and wept. Or the old friend who surfaces after years of distance to say they needed to know you wrote it. And some people leave it quietly, mostly without announcement. They just kind of recede, right? And the ones who recede were often friends with a version of you that only existed because you kept the fuller version under wraps. And when you take the wraps off, the contract changes, right? They didn't sign up for this person. They signed up for the one who didn't push. And they're grieving that person, the quieter, more manageable you, even if they don't have language for that, even if they couldn't articulate that if you ask them directly, right? And I've had to learn to have compassion for that grief. And I'll be honest, it took me a while. It is much easier to be irritated. It is much easier to feel abandoned and let that harden into something justified and clean, right? But the truth is more complicated, and I am, unfortunately, constitutionally incapable of settling for the clean version when the complicated one is sitting right there. Now, I want to tell you something that I haven't talked about in quite this context before, even though it's probably the origin story of every hesitation I just described. About 15 years ago, I had a friendship that I believed, like genuinely, fully believed, was the real thing. I'm not talking about the kind of friendship where you mostly like each other and it's convenient and you grab coffee sometimes. I mean the kind where you go all the fucking way in, where you say the things you don't say to most people, or where you hand over, like I said, the interior parts of yourself because you have decided with some confidence that this is a person who deserves them. And I was wrong. Not immediately and not obviously. Hindsight has this particular cruelty where it lines up all the things you should have noticed and presents them in sequence like a very patient prosecutor. There were signs. There were moments where something felt slightly off, or where a boundary was nudged in a direction I didn't quite clock in real time, or where, something I'd shared resurfaced in a way it shouldn't have. Little things, individually dismissible, collectively, in retrospect, a very clear picture. But I was trusting. That's the thing about being someone who values deep connection. You extend the benefit of the doubt further than maybe you should because you're operating from your own framework. And you assume that the person across from you is playing by the same rules that you are, right? That this stays between us means the same thing to both of you. That the intimacy is mutual and protected. It wasn't. So what I had shared, the deep personal, not for public consumption parts of my life came back to haunt me. And the particular kind of pain that comes with that isn't just the pain of betrayal, though that's certainly part of it. It's the retroactive pain of looking back at every vulnerable moment and understanding that it was witnessed by someone who was not who you thought they were. You know, this feels like a violation of sorts. It kind of rewrites the past in a way that's disorienting and, for a while, pretty hard to recover from. And what I noticed, and what I still notice, because this isn't entirely past tense, is that it didn't stop when the friendship did. And that's the thing that nobody really warns you about, right? Like when someone misuses what you've trusted them with, they tend to keep using it. The confidences don't get retired just because the relationship does. You can end a friendship, but you cannot always end the consequences of what you shared inside of it. So when it came time to write the book and when it came time to record the podcast, when it came time to voluntarily and deliberately and very publicly share the things I had once shared quietly and privately with people I thought I could trust, I had a pretty complicated relationship with the idea of vulnerability that most people writing their first memoir probably don't have, because I already knew what it felt like when it went wrong. I had a case study. It was a pretty formative one. The difference this time, and this is something I've talked about in other episodes, so I won't spend too long here, is that before I went public with any of it, I sat down with a very small, very specific group of friends. The real ones. Not real in the sentimental greeting card sense, but real in the structural sense. Okay? So people who had earned access and who I had watched over time demonstrate what they do with the things they're trusted with. These are people I have a long shared history with in the way that you might expect. But on top of that history is something I've come to value more. They have respect. They don't traffic in gossip. They don't orbit people who do. And because of that, when I shared things with them before the book came out, I was not sitting across from them with one eye on the door, calculating what might leak and in what direction. I could actually be present. I could actually say the thing without a contingency plan running simultaneously in the back of my head, right? That's a gift that you don't fully appreciate until you've had the opposite experience, until you've handed your truth to someone and watched them use it as currency. So when I talk about the silence that followed the book, the people who kind of went quiet and the friends I expected to hear from but didn't, what I want you to understand is that the silence wasn't the first complicated thing I'd navigated around vulnerability and trust. It was just the latest. And because I'd already done the hard work figuring out who actually gets a seat at the table before any of it went public, the silence from the periphery stung, but it didn't destabilize me in the way it might have in the past, right? Because the people I needed to not disappear didn't disappear. And I knew that going in. And that knowing, which I guess was only possible because of how badly a different knowing had gone 15 years ago, made all the difference. So trauma has this way of becoming tuition eventually, if you let it. It cost me something, and then, slowly, it taught me something. And what it taught me made the next round survivable in a way the first one wasn't. I'll take the deal, even if, I'd have preferred to not need it. And you know what? The people who've been quieter have their reasons, Maybe they aren't gone. They just aren't discussing my past with me, and that's 100% fine. And that leads me to this thought. How do I stay compassionate when the silence kind of sits there like a third person in the room? And the first thing I come back to with that is emotional capacity. Not everyone has the tools to navigate these deep emotional waters at all. And the frustrating part of this is that it has nothing to do with intelligence or love or even intention. It's simply a matter of equipment, right? Some people are only equipped for the shallows. They're perfectly good people living perfectly full lives in the shallows, and they have absolutely no frame of reference for what I've just handed them. When I drove to someone's house and put my book in their hands or in their mailbox, I was on some level inviting them to scuba dive. I brought the tank and I mapped the reef and I did everything I could do to make it as accessible as possible. But if the person standing on the shore doesn't know how to dive, if they've never been trained for depth, if the idea of going under is genuinely frightening to them, they're just going to smile and wave and watch me go under without them, right? That's not a rejection at all. It's just a limitation, and limitations aren't sins. The second thing I think about in this way is narrative identity. This idea that we're all constantly authoring and revising the story we tell ourselves and the people we're closest to. So when you go public with your secrets, you are not just rewriting your own story. You're forcing everyone who knows you to pick up their pencil and make revisions to a chapter they thought was finished. That's a lot of damn homework to assign someone who didn't ask for it and doesn't particularly enjoy writing. Some people are just tired. Maybe I haven't heard from some of these people because they haven't even got to my book yet. Perfectly fine. Honestly, let it sit there for 6 years and revisit it. Like maybe you'll need it down the road. Maybe you just don't need it now for whatever reason. Don't know. They have their own lives, their own chapter 6s that they're stuck on, their own things that they're not ready to face. And in that context, the silence isn't a verdict on your worth or your writing or the courage it took to put it all on the page. It's just what it looks like when someone doesn't have the bandwidth. And I get it because I've been on that side too. I started to think of it this way. The silence isn't a no to me. It's just a not now to that level of depth that I'm shoving in their face. And not now is not the same as never. Sometimes not now just means not right now. And I can live with that, as I said. So something else too. This wasn't in the original plan for this episode, but I have to include it because there are things I know now that I wish someone had told me before I started handing out pieces of myself at kitchen tables and doorsteps. Nobody tells you that releasing something deeply personal is a 2-phase experience. The first phase is all adrenaline and vulnerability and the terrifying but exhilarating feeling of having finally said the thing out loud. That phase has a momentum to it. You're in motion and you are doing the thing. The hardest part, you think, is behind you. And then comes the second phase, which is waiting, which is the silence, which is the long, ambiguous aftermath of having said the thing and now living in a world where it has been said. And you cannot unsay it, and you just have to wait to find out what that costs you and what it gives you in return, right? Nobody tells you that the second phase is quieter and harder and requires a completely different kind of courage than the first. The first phase takes the courage to speak, and the second phase takes the courage to sit in that uncertainty without letting it eat you alive, right? And nobody tells you that some of the people who disappear aren't doing it to you. They're doing it because of themselves, because your story surfaced something in them that they weren't ready for. Maybe your honesty cracked something open that they've been holding shut, and they don't know what to do with that crack, so they step back and they go quiet. They go back to the life that they were living before they sat down with your book and had to confront the fact that things are often not what they appear to be, not in your life, not in anyone's life, and possibly not even in their own life. And I'm not saying that's easy to watch. I'm saying it's worth understanding. Once you understand it, you can stop taking things personally, right? Taking things personally, in my experience, I think is one of the most exhausting hobbies a person can have. As I've gotten older, I've definitely stopped giving as big a shit about things. As I close out this season, this is an off-script episode, but it's kind of attached to the back end of season 3. I want to talk directly to the creators and the truth tellers and the people who are standing at the edge of their own version of this, whatever form it takes for you. Maybe it's a book, or maybe it's a conversation you've been avoiding, or a post you've written and deleted 17 times because you're not sure the world is ready for it, or you're not sure you're ready for the world to see it. What I want you to know, you might lose people. In fact, you almost certainly will in one way or another. Some will vanish outright. Some will recede slowly. Some will change in ways you don't have language for yet. And that will hurt in ways that you also don't have language for. But I want you to think about what physics calls the law of the vacuum. Okay? Nature does not allow emptiness to persist. A vacuum must be filled. When something leaves a space, something else moves in to occupy it. This is not wishful thinking. This is just how things work. Okay? When the silent connections drift away, they're making room. That's all it is. They're clearing the frequency for the people who will hear what you put out and recognize themselves in it. And the people who will email you, maybe not right away, maybe 6 months from now, whatever, maybe a year, who knows? Doesn't matter. And they will say what you wrote gave them the permission they needed to breathe again. And I did an episode before this season released about my delivery of the book's experience and people who looked at me and said, me too, and started to open up and kind of tell me their story. This matters. And I want to make sure and be completely clear that this matters. It mattered so much to me. It still does. But giving someone permission they needed to breathe again and to say, what they've been holding and start this chapter, they've been afraid to open. These people exist and they are out there right now living their lives and carrying their chapter 6s, and they do not yet know that your story is going to matter to them, but it will. And none of that can happen if you don't do the terrifying thing and put the truth into the world. So I don't regret driving 3 towns over or signing those books with the kind words that I meant. I don't regret the delivery or the vulnerability or the specific chosen exposure that went into every sentence of the book, right? Because every single one of those gestures, what it was about my integrity, about what I owe myself and what I owe the story and what I believe the truth deserves. And their response or the absence of it is not mine to carry. They supported me in taking my story into their world. That means a ton on its own. I'm not judging anyone at all. I'm just sharing experience that you listeners might one day encounter in some capacity. I'm not saying you're going to write a book like this, but in just some way you might encounter this. And now you might understand why. So my job was to tell the truth and hand it over. And everyone else's job is to process it on their own timeline, in their own way, with whatever tools they have available to them. And if their timeline is never, then that's information too. It's not comfortable information, but it's honest. And I have committed, for better or worse, to preferring honest over comfortable. That's the whole point of being unbound, right? It is not a state of having everything figured out or having been received in the way that you hoped. It's a decision. It's this ongoing, sometimes daily, sometimes difficult choice to no longer tie your sense of worth to whether the people you handed your truth to know what to do with it. I released my secrets to set myself free. That's it. I didn't do it to cage anyone else into giving me a response that validates what it cost me. So, to the friend who maybe stopped at chapter 6, I hope you find what you need in these pages eventually. And I hope that whatever stopped you has nothing to do with me and everything to do with something you're working out that's entirely your own. And to the friend who never showed up at all, I genuinely hope you're okay. I mean that with no sarcasm whatsoever, which, if you know me, you understand is actually saying something. And to the one who's still drafting that email, the one who has it half written in a tab that they keep minimizing, take your time. Genuinely, there's no expiration on this at all. I'm not waiting by the inbox. I'm too busy living in the particular hard-won clarity that exists on the other side of having said the thing. It turns out the other side is quieter too, though. It's a different kind of quiet, though. It's a better one, actually. This is getting to be a long episode, but I have to get on to this next part because we want to try to fit it into this episode. I'm hoping that we can. Since the book and the podcast launched, I've been flooded with requests from readers and listeners who want a look inside Nate's perspective on the things that I shared in the book. Obviously I was sharing my side of things. And I've had a few specific questions. I can't name who they're all from. And we might do this again some other time. I know that there's a group that he and I are both in, and people ask questions there, and he openly answers them too. If you're a subscriber as well, you know that Nate and I have already recorded a longer, deeper conversation behind the paywall. You might have even heard some snippets or previews on social media. Because of that, there might be a little bit of overlap here and there. But for the most part, this is all new territory. I figured it was only fair to give the supporters what they've been asking for and bring Nate back to the mic. We have to do this in phone call format again, though, because he was unable to join me live. Busy guy, whatever. He's working a farm. That's really, really busy. Last time we did this in a previous Q&A, I think it was the All Access Pass episode. I think the phone rang 84 times before he picked up. He told me he'd be ready today. So let's see. Okay, this is ridiculous. Come on, man, don't do this. My Lord, my word.
Hello?
You are an absolute shit.
What'd I do now?
I just told everyone you were expecting me and that you
Oh,
wouldn't let me
yeah?
wait like last time, and you let it go like to 4 rings or whatever it was just to make a liar out of me, and then you answer like you don't know who's calling. You're a dink.
Look,
I
I had to make sure it was actually you and not a telemarketer.
Okay, fine.
You know I don't like being rushed, Beth.
No, of course not. Clearly. Anyway, I was just telling the listeners that people are wondering about the Nate version of my
Right.
story, and we've known each other for 36 years now.
That's a lot of mileage.
Most of it
And
your fault.
yeah, I'm not going to argue that.
Of course not. So let's go back to April 1990.
Sure.
You're the new guy from Brisbane, and you walk into this high school hallway and see me being, I guess, harassed by
Mhm.
a group of guys. What was actually going through your head at that time?
Honestly, I just saw this girl who looked, well, she looked very uncomfortable.
Uh-huh.
I didn't even think about the confrontation or whatever. I just knew I wasn't moving until they did.
Okay.
But once they left and I actually looked at you,
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess I just felt this immediate need to be a barrier,
Okay.
between you and whatever was making you look that way.
Okay. I
I was a shy kid, really.
Yeah.
But with you, that just kind of evaporated.
Yeah, you were, like my bodyguard before you even knew my name.
Pretty much. I remember thinking your hair was a bit of a mess, too.
Hey, it was 1990. We all had messy hair, and you're fluffy mop. You're not really one to talk. Like, come on.
No,
No.
I guess
So
not.
you see this girl with disaster hair getting harassed, and you think, yeah, that's my problem to solve. Like,
When you put it that way, it sounds like some pretty bad judgment on my part.
yeah, 36 years later.
Still bad
Yeah,
judgment.
I
Yep,
think so.
definitely.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. So we had that whole year of grade 10 together. And then my family went to Florida in the spring of 1991, and I missed you.
All right.
Um, what were you going through then? Because that's, when I came back, when everything kind of changed for us, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely in a holding pattern.
Mm-hmm.
You seemed happy, and I didn't
Oh.
want to mess that up.
Hmm.
I'd
Uh,
um I'd known for a while I had feelings for you. I think I knew
Okay.
by that first summer, really, but I was a shy bastard. I figured being the guy who was just there was more important than making a move and, well, potentially losing the friendship.
So you knew by the first summer? You sat on that for how long? Like,
I don't think that's any of your business, Beth.
what is this entire reason that we're doing this? Jeez.
A
How long?
while.
Okay. A number?
Years, Beth.
Oh,
It was years.
okay.
Are you
Um,
happy now?
a little bit. He's been this forthcoming our entire relationship. Truly, it's a gift. Like, wow.
You're welcome.
And yeah, okay. So here's a weird pivot. I want to talk about the deck real quick because you and I had a conversation about this recently after the episode aired where I
Mhm.
told about this experience, this situation that we were in. A listener asked if you thought that I was completely mental after hearing about that. I was so afraid of Brandon and that he was watching us, and I made this huge production to get you to leave.
Right.
Um, I even got my dad involved, and I remember being so frantic. Like, what were you thinking while I was basically pushing you off the property?
Um, I I guess I was just confused.
Okay.
Like, to me, it was just a nice afternoon.
Yeah.
Then you're acting like the house is on fire. And when your dad stepped in to move me along, I could feel the tension.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, man, whatever she's living in, it's a nightmare. I
Yeah.
didn't realize until way later that you were literally acting as a human shield for me.
Yeah, I
You
was.
were protecting me, and I just felt like I'd overstayed my
Yeah, I'm
welcome.
sorry I couldn't tell you the truth then.
I know you were doing what you had to do to keep everyone safe.
If you had known, what would you have done?
Stayed.
Like, do you think
Yeah,
yeah, I know. That's why I didn't tell you.
I figured that out eventually.
You would have been an idiot for sure.
A loyal idiot.
Yeah. When you left for Ohio in 92, people see full athletic scholarship and think it's the dream, right? So
Right.
what was the moment you realized that it was more of like a cage?
So I guess it was the athlete script.
Okay.
Like, I felt like a circus pony.
Mm,
I'd sit in these meetings and feel empty, I guess, like I was rotting.
hmm
I'd call you and I could hear how much you were struggling back home, and it made the distance feel impossible.
Yeah, I
By December or whenever it was, I realized I'd rather be a failure and be home where things were real, where you were.
But you gave up a full-ass scholarship to come back.
Mhm.
But for me,
Don't make it weird.
I'm not making it weird. It's
You're
incredibly
making it weird, Beth.
okay, fine. Moving on. You came back and got that apartment, so I just wanted to talk about October of 1993, the couch, the bomb I dropped on you. Um,
My first thought was
it
just pure dumb giddiness.
was
I
cute.
mean, I really thought we could make it work.
Yeah.
I'd talk to your belly and feel this incredible purpose.
Mm.
I wasn't just Nate anymore. I was a protector.
Okay. You like talked to my belly before I'd even fully processed that there was a baby in it.
Yeah, well, I was probably a little ahead of the curve on that one.
A little, yeah. Um, when he died, I know what I felt, but what was it like for
I
you?
felt like I'd failed. I was supposed to stop the world from hurting you both,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't.
Hmm.
I know you felt like you failed too.
Yeah, for sure.
Seeing Kier, knowing he was mine and he was gone, it broke something in me. I had to be the strong one, but inside, I was just a kid who'd also lost his whole world in a matter of hours.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
is this is that why you stayed? Like when I turned prickly? Like when I was being so cruel to you on purpose? Like Woodstock 94 that weekend, I literally
Mm-mm.
ran out the side gate when I saw you, or like even the grocery store situation,
Right.
and some other times I didn't write about where like we kind of crossed paths and everything. Like, is that why you stayed?
Yeah. I
Mm,
knew you were hurting because I was hurting too.
yeah,
I knew you weren't mean, Beth. You
I
were
was
just,
mean though.
I don't know, bleeding. Um, I figured if I could handle the thorns, eventually the person I loved would come back out.
Mm.
I'd already lost Kier. I wasn't about to lose you too.
I ran out a side gate, Nate,
I know.
like a fugitive from you, my best friend. Like,
You were always dramatic.
that's fair.
I still would have followed you.
I know.
I'm
I
a stage 5.
stage 5. Okay. So going to 1996. This was the year that kind of broke everything. I broke everything. You lost both your parents about 5, 6 months apart, and
Hmm.
then I met Brian, and I chose him. Why were you relieved? Because that still kills me to think about.
Because we were drowning in the shared experience, Beth.
Right.
Seeing you find lightness with Brian, something that
Mhm.
wasn't tied to Kier or Brandon, I knew I couldn't give you that.
Mm,
I loved you enough to let you go find a version of yourself that didn't have to be a survivor every second.
right.
It hurt like hell, but
Of course.
it was the right break back then.
So Brian knows about all of this, by the way. He's not threatened by you. He
I
it,
know.
okay.
He texted me.
He did not.
He did not, but he should. I'm a delight.
Oh my god.
Some days.
Okay. Wow. So we talked about this in depth in the subscriber video podcast. People ask why you never married or had kids of your own, and I'm going to ask again if that's something you regret. I know the answer, so give it to me.
Some days.
Okay.
But I'm at peace. I mean, you set a standard for what's real. Now I'd rather have our own category
Me too.
than a traditional life that felt like I was just playing a part.
Yeah, I feel like I should apologize for that.
You should, but don't.
So, what would 20-something Nate think of us right now?
He'd be shocked we survived the wreckage, but he'd be proud too.
Yeah, for sure.
We're still standing.
We are. And are we really okay?
Yeah, Beth.
Okay.
We're really okay.
Okay. All right.
I think you're the only one who still needs convincing.
Maybe. I love you, Nate, so much.
Love you too, Beth.
All right. So
Forever.
Oh, see? Years. It took me years to get that out of him, too. Okay, thank you for being part of this season of Unbound. It's been raw and real, and, you know, I don't think I would have it any other way. I do appreciate everyone who supported me in all the ways that you have. I will see you in the next season. Not sure when that's coming, but until then, please watch for my off-script episodes. Going to try to do those at least once a week. While we're between seasons here. Maybe more. We'll see. If there's anything that you want me to dig into, contact info is in the show notes. I love to research and dig into stuff and write about it and clearly talk about it. So if you have any weird, fun, funny, strange, odd, whatever, all of it, I love to do it. So share any ideas that you want to hear me rambling on about. And I will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Unbound with Beth Curry. Join the conversation in the Facebook group or visit author.bethcurry.com. Want to support the show? Head to ko-fi.com/unbound podcast. Until next time, stay unbound.